A hiss like a steam whistle tears through cobblestone streets as a top-hatted engineer slams a redstone lever, and a line of harnessed creepers detonates in perfect rhythm, sending pistons pumping and factories roaring to life. The skyline fills with green sparks and cheerful chaos. Each scene unfolds in sharp 20-second beats, plunging you into an industrial revolution fueled by temperamental explosions and absurd ingenuity. Meet Professor Gideon Gearwick, a square-jawed, monoclue-wearing tinkerer who insists on calling creeper detonations green steam. He strides across soot-stained plazas with a blueprint scroll as long as a railway and a grin that occasionally snacks on common sense. His lab is a cathedral of iron, cobble, and experimental duct tape. Rows of contraptions click and convulse, each piston fired by a tiny, harnessed bomb with feelings. Gideon narrates like a tour guide at a combustion museum, both earnest and slightly terrified. Beat. A close-up. Gideon's gloved hand flips a redstone switch. The camera tracks down a line of tethered creepers wearing little leather collars and top hats. Fashion is morale, and they shiver like orchestral timpani, tiny green embers flickering. A hiss. One pops. Its explosion drives a piston gear's turn, a bell rings, a nearby workbench launches a loaf of bread toward a waiting villager. The villager, covered in flour pixels, blinks, takes a bite and claps. Marvelous, he says, as if the bakery's safety inspector were a fan of controlled annihilation. Beat. Outside, chimneys puff blocky smoke, green-tinted for branding, and steam whistles are replaced by rhythmic hisses. Streetcars lurk on cobbled rails, each powered by a compact creeper housed in a brass carriage. Conductors in waistcoats referee the creatures, waving tiny red flags. A child drops an iron button it skitters under a carriage. The conductor curses softly. Not again. He pulls a lever, the creeper pops the button, rockets into a vendor's basket. Chaos resolves into commerce. Gideon is our human Reed. Humanoid, constant in a world gone explosively efficient. He believes that harnessing unpredictability is the only honest path forward. In one beat, he conferences with a council of soot-faced mayors. In the next, he's hunched over a chalkboard, calculating the precise microdelay necessary for a string of creepers to power a textile mill without quilting the workers. The chalkboard looks like the aftermath of a thunderstorm, scribbles, arrows, and a sketch of a creeper wearing safety goggles. He says, timing, and taps the diagram as if tapping will tap back. Beat. A factory floor sequence. Conveyors of wool and iron glide beneath a scaffold of creeper charges. The explosions are almost musical, bassy thuds with high, fizzing overtones, and factory robots made of pistons and hoppers bob in time. A foreman, a villager in a soot-smeared apron, whistles a jaunty tune. A mistake. One creeper sneezes mid-detonation, an emergent behavior no engineer predicted, and a roll of cloth becomes a flag. Someone seizes the flag and waves it like a victory standard. Gideon pauses, pen midair, and smiles because emergent behavior is good for propaganda. Beat. In the quieter alleys, though, the dark humor unspools. There are graveyards of failed prototypes, copper whistles melted, harnesses singed, a plaque that reads, "In memory of the duplex creep coil, too." A widow drapes black wool over her cottage after her husband, a former creeper handler, took an unplanned ride into the heavens. The town's funeral parlor offers two options: brass casket or recycled redstone. Inflation meets morality. In a brief, tender moment, Gideon tucks a tiny safety sign onto a monument and draws a small creeper with a halo. He lingers longer than he lets on. Beat. The revolution's marketing machine is relentless. Posters plaster brick walls, progress powered green, with a smiling creeper mascot in a bowler hat. Street performers, acrobat villagers, and one particularly spry pig reenact the heroic detonation of Creeper 1, the legendary first charge that kicked off the era. Children throw confetti made of tiny TNT fragments, safely inert, naturally and squeal when green sparks pop overhead. The air smells like coal, lavender polish, and a faint and permanently lingering ozone beat. Rural landscapes have been recast. Fields once tilled by oxen now run on creeper plowlines. Chains of small charges spaced precisely to loosen earth without vaporizing the crop. There is an art to placement. The farmers hum songs to the creepers, rhythms that soothe them into cooperative pops. A windmill retooled as a safety net spins lazily above, its blades painted with the motto, "Harness, don't harm." A twist. A group of rebellious sheep discovers that if they stand on a certain set of pressure plates, they can make the creeper charges pop in a pattern that spells Ba in blocky smoke. The farmers, proud and baffled, stage an impromptu festival beat. Technology weds whimsical invention. A carriage telegraph, for instance, uses micro-detonations to send puffs of green smoke in Morse. Papa pause. It is the height of romanticism. Lovers arrange synchronized pops, and postmen deliver messages with the smoky flourish of a marriage proposal. One telegram reads simply, "Meet, bring coal." Romance and logistics cohabitate in soot-streaked harmony beat. Not all is seamless. There are sabotage tales, clockwork radicals who prefer water wheels and scorn the green boom. They sabotage redstone relays with stona-faced determination, replacing harnesses with rubber chickens. In one 20th scene, masked saboteurs plant a chorus of chickens instead of hisses. The street explodes into squawks and feather confetti. The crowd laughs, but Gideon makes a note. He believes that every comedic mutiny teaches better safety protocols, beat. The economy reshuffles itself. Innovators craft insurance policies titled in case of pop, actuarial tables with columns for micro-pop, mid-pop, and all-the-way pop. Banks offer stop-loss vaults lined with obsidian and empathy. A banker in a flat cap offers a village elder a handwritten bond, guaranteed against spontaneous fashionable explosions. The elder asks. To an extent, the banker answers beat. In the middle of all this, Gideon stages a public experiment, a demonstration meant to unite the town and prove that controlled detonations are humane, predictable, and profitable. He builds a machine the size of a cathedral, the green engine. It is a lattice of pistons, redstone coils, safety signs, and glass observation domes filled with cheering villagers. Newspapers call it the culmination of human and creeper cooperation. The crowd holds its breath like a stretched bowstring beat. The demonstration begins on cue. Creepers march in, harnesses gleaming, and take their posts. Gideon, microphone in hand, gives a short speech for progress and pies. The crowd laughs. Then he pulls the master lever. The engine ticks in a perfect sequence. Pistons rhythmically push and pull. Gears sing under the strain. And for a glorious beat, the green engine hums like a living thing. Then, an unexpected hiccup interrupts the ceremony briefly. The hiss that started it all was not a whisper in a lab, it was a cathedral chord of green, a living pressure valve beneath a blocky sky. The moment a crate of wild creepers was coaxed into a row of iron cages, and the first one let out a soft, measured sibilance. The industrial skyline of the world rearranged itself. Green steam, not water, not oil, but vapor that smelled faintly of ozone and wet TNT, rolled out of tall chimneys and painted the horizon jade. This is the hour where engines learned to purr and panic at the same time. Meta-Girite was the unlikely conductor of that moment. Square-jawed, soot-smeared, and forever carrying a wrench that clicked like a metronome. She stood on the ledge of her first creeper-powered boiler and watched the green mist curl into a sigh. Her hair was braided with copper wire. Her left boot had a dent from a misplaced dynamite block. She called her machine a hiss engine, which was true and also a terrible pun. Behind her, a row of hissing boxes, each with a small plush creeper painted on the latch, a safety talisman, fed their breath into pistons, turbines, and an audaciously rickety conveyor that moved stone like it had somewhere to be cut to the factory floor. Blocks of iron clanged, belts groaned, and tiny explosions ticked out like a clock. A plumber in a paper hat stamped a foot across a line of steam. The green vapor flowed around him glossy as slime. The camera, if this were a documentary camera with a sense of humor, would linger on the soot patterns that looked suspiciously like creeper faces. Scene change. The first hiss engine coughed, a toothed grate spat a shower of emerald sparks, and a kettle on the engine's flank whistled with actual musicality. Someone cheered. Someone else ran away at his genius was not merely that she harnessed the hiss, but that she built personality into it. Creepers, in this economy, were a workforce of temperament and temperamentality. Some hummed like bees, others screeched like old violins. She learned that a shy creeper would offer a long, steady hiss that was perfect for the slow, meticulous work of glass blowing. The loud, temperamental ones were better for short, violent tasks, blast forging obsidian, or clearing a stubborn mountain of dirt. "Match the hiss to the job," she said once, and the apprentices wrote it down as if it were doctrine. There were belts of emerald smoke and conveyor belt ballets. A creeper couple named Hisley and Hissandra had become minor celebrities for their synchronized eruptions. They powered an entire loom that produced a striped fabric used by the city guards' uniforms. Guards liked that the fabric smelled faintly explosive. It made them feel impressive and slightly unsafe. Scene shift. A marketplace vendor sold creeper steam tea in tiny cups that steamed neon green. Customers coughed, nodded, and paid extra for the tingle on the tongue. Safety protocols were a performance art. A sign hung above the main assembly, "Do not poke the hiss." Beneath it, a second hand-painted sign read, "Please do not pet, even if soft." Etta, being a tinkerer with an ethical streak, insisted on helmets with grass on top to make creepers feel at home and reduce startling. The helmets were as fashionable as they were dangerous. A short, armored foreman once tried to instill discipline by tapping a crate with a mallet. The crate answered by undulating like a cat that hates mallets, then produced a hiss that blew the foreman's mustache clean off. He staggered, looked at the sky, and then approved a new class of mallet with springs. The hiss engines were modular, which is engineering speak for somewhat stable until they weren't. They accepted attachments: a plunger for forging, a bellows for glasswork, a piston for hurling boulders into new foundations. The green steam could be throttled with valves carved from redstone. Etta's apprentices spent afternoons learning to read hisses like weather reports. In one particularly cinematic moment, a storm rolled in and the hisses went white-hot. The city dimmed lights, and every hiss engine became a lighthouse of verdant chaos, their size slicing the rain into glittering cubes. A boy with a paper boat shouted, "It's raining hisses," and then thought better of his metaphors. Comedic aside. The first mayoral trial to regulate creeper labor devolved into a comedic farce. A councilman tried to ask a creeper a direct question about welfare, and the creeper responded with a delicate fizz that caused his cigar to explode. Legislation was passed anyway. The bill had 3 clauses, 2 of which were about hat sizes. Etta laughed when she read it, and then immediately reorganized her workshop to comply. Compliance, in this world, looked a lot like retrofitting engines with soft moss lining, installing breathing intervals, and inventing a union handshake that involved a slight hiss. Not all was smooth. Saboteurs, jealous rival towns, disgruntled redstone alchemists, and a league of smug endermen tried to weaponize the hiss. They began designing panic creepers, small, agile variants that would scream on command and cause whole districts of machines to overheat with embarrassment. Etta countered by teaching some creepers to hum lullabies. There were television spots, blocky, earnest, and slightly off, showing a stoic creeper cradling a baby with a soft purr. It did wonders for public relations. Twists on the factory floor arrived like tiny earthquakes. One day, a hiss engine developed a taste for jazz. It synchronized its hisses into syncopated rhythms, and the entire block went into an impromptu dance. Workers abandoned their posts to clap in awkward 3-beat patterns, while a creeper played percussion on a steam pipe. Another time, a creeper refused to hiss at all and instead adopted an industrial stillness that became fashionable among poets. The still hiss became a symbol of contemplation. People lit block candles and stood very still near it, which made the creeper suspicious and then pleased. The environmental effects were both wondrous and alarming. Green steam fertilized rooftop gardens into sudden jungles of melon and pumpkin. The river that fed the city glowed faintly in the dark, like a trail left behind by glowing worms. Fish adapted, developing tiny pixel fins shaped like creeper faces. Tourism boomed. Scientists were baffled, artists inspired, and bakers invented a new bread that rose with a little hiss when undercooked. There were new smells in the city, coal and copper, but also that peculiar tang of compressed TNT that made bakers add citrus to their recipes. Etta's fame grew, and with it came a philosophical problem. Could industry that literally relied on volatile, living explosives ever be ethical? She held salons where poets and miners argued, often using props. At one salon, a philosopher argued that the hiss taught people patience. The hiss forces you to listen. A miner replied that the hiss mostly taught miners how to rebuild their bedrooms. There were tense, beautiful debates about consent. Creepers did not consent in a human sense, but they could be coaxed and trained. Etta tried to balance invention with compassion, a precarious scale that often leaned toward pragmatism. Innovation didn't stop at factories. Transportation reimagined the world in Emerald. Trains with creeper-propelled locomotives hissed along tracks, each carriage lined with moss to calm its passengers. A union for creeper engineers demanded that every train have a nap car where creepers could decompress, and the government passed it because politicians liked nap car photos. Shipping containers were insulated with wool and lullabies. Cities rearranged into cardioid patterns to manage blast impact. The skyline rippled with hissing neon like a green heartbeat. The absurdity of it all was both the problem and the charm. Statues to anonymous hisses dotted plazas. Bronze creepers frozen mid-exhale, wearing little brass goggles. Street performers tried to imitate hisses using harmonicas. The results varied. Etta installed a small plaque on her workshop that read, "Inventory, 1 hiss approximate." It was true enough. Engines were living things, and living things had quirks. They taught people to plan with mercy and to throw a party when the gears didn't grind. At the end of a long day, Etta would sit on a stack of crates and listen to the city breathe in modular, explosive intervals. The green steam painted her face like war paint made of light, and she felt both triumphant and slightly guilty. She had built a world where architecture learned to be careful around its own inhabitants, and where the sound of industry was literally a living chorus. But she also knew that whichever way the hiss leaned, the consequences would ripple outward, into politics, into art, into the very blocks of civilization. As night folded its square shadow over the factories, the hiss engines lowered their tempo. Hisley and Hissandra sang their lullaby, a rhythm that sounded suspiciously like house music to an untrained ear. Someone switched on a lantern that smelled faintly of citrus and blast. Etta tightened a bolt, whispered, "Tomorrow we build gentler gears," and the hiss answered with a contented crackle. The camera pans upward, catching chimneys that look like teeth in a green grin, and the narrator mutters with the faintest trace of irony. Harnessing the creeper had remade industry, but it had also handed the world a question about power, about living machines, and about the price of progress when the engine itself might explode. The question would not be answered by tools alone. It would be argued in courtrooms, workshops, and tea stalls. The next chapter would be louder. Green steam erupted in slabs of emerald fog from factory chimneys, hissing like 1,000 kettles that secretly liked explosives. The town smelled of moss, solder, and a distant pop that everyone pretended not to hear. In the yard, Professor Hiram Grinkle stood, monocle glinting, smudged apron threaded with redstone. He was small, squarish, and wildly proud of two things: making predictable hisses and avoiding craters. He raised a hand. Hundreds of harnessed creepers inhaled, exhaled, and puffed a polite green sigh. The sigh sounded like steam, like consent, like a chorus that could ruin a street. The steam was called green because it was green, and because it smelled faintly of fireworks. Engines did not simply burn, they hissed opinions. Pistons worked to the rhythm of tiny controlled blasts, conveyors moved by a series of courteous detonations. Gears caught the little pushes, and the town learned to count in SSS. Beat, a cut to the green chambers, where creepers were managed like livestock and like instruments. Tile floors, brass valves, harnesses with redstone clamps. Each chamber had a hiss regulator, a mechanical ear that listened, learned, and adjusted. Missed a beat and you either got efficiency or a hole in someone's roof. The creepers had formed a union, the Society for Satisfying SSS, and negotiated in fizzes, puffs, and semaphore. Their demands were simple: predictable schedules, soft beds, and fewer surprise postcards from gravity. When talks went wrong, one or two chairs vanished into the floor. It was an economical kind of diplomacy. Markets glittered in emerald glass. Carts sold stabilized sizzle, creeper tonic, and jars labeled guaranteed not to boom. Children played dodge it fuse, stepping nimbly over redstone while shouting tick. Vendors hawked smell-proof masks as fashion. It was commerce rewritten in hisses. The Navy adapted too. Creeper-powered barges trailed emerald wakes and brought naval officers who hired diffusers, singers trained to soothe any anxious engine beneath. Captain Barnaby kept a wooden chicken on the helm for luck, he said, and fewer sudden renovations. His success rate was respectable, which in naval terms meant that most bridges were still bridges. But where there was power, there were plots. Rival towns tried to steal hisses and regulators, and saboteurs attempted to flip valves into surprise mode. This gave rise to creepersmiths, technicians who could tune a creeper's cadence with a glance. They built the hissometer, a grandfatherly machine that sniffed steam, plotted patterns, and forecast moods. It looked slightly smug. Comedy lived in misreads. A creeper fell in love with a decorative furnace, produced such operatic hisses that engineers improvised a piston orchestra. The hush valve, an absurd marriage of bellow, music box, and schedule, learned to counter a tick with a hum. It turned imminent catastrophe into productive push, improving productivity, tea, and municipal composure. Festivals became elaborate tests of crowd control. Domesticated creepers in tiny hats marched, tails trumpeting polite hisses. A child crowned one, and it launched confetti of emerald pixels. The mayor signed hiss-giving into law, while a grumpy gardener filed a counter-complaint that created a small crater and a note about composting. Not everyone loved it. Priests whispered about signs, and ethics poets longed for a quiet smelt and sabotaged a factory with dozens of flutes. The production line slipped into a sleepy waltz, and headlines wondered if melody could upset metrics. The answer was yes, sometimes, and profit hiccuped. A scandal bloomed. A baron caught painted green, disguising himself as a creeper to understand labor. He was found whispering SS social bonds in a cupboard, and the jokes were merciless. His hairdresser went on strike. Innovations multiplied. Creeper lightbulbs glowed with safe simmer, elevators hummed people upward, and Hiss Couture provided muffles for polite events. Diets promised calmer dispositions, powdered lavender entered the menu. There were markets for shimmery calming blocks and for beds with extra padding. The economy learned to soothe and to bribe. Professor Grinkle kept a ledger of incidents. His notes were meticulous, his marginalia often read. Note: do not attempt to fit a creeper into a pocket. He preferred Hansen tinkering to speeches, and his favorite device remained the hush valve. It learned the microripples in green steam, anticipating ticks and converting them into cooperative pushes. It saved bridges, reduced insurance, and made tea taste marginally better. In one celebrated trial, it synchronized 27 near catastrophes into a single productive burst that finished a bridge overnight. Twilight painted blocky rooftops an emerald glow. The hiss of industry braided progress to anxiety. Professor Grinkle leaned on scaffolding, watching his machines breathe green steam and exhale small, useful chaos. He understood inventions. They were brilliant, dangerous, and polite enough to be trusted only tentatively. For every hush valve, a dozen new problems would hatch: labor questions, philosophers' complaints, and yes, craters. "Ready?" asked a voice crisp as a piston. "Always," he replied. The hiss answered, and for an instant it sounded almost like pride. The town settled, gears ticking like a heart. Somewhere a child dreamed of a better regulator, and somewhere a poet tuned a flute. The revolution had turned the world green and loud. The question left hanging between pistons and steam was whether humanity would remain the engineer of its comforts or the person setting the table while the creatures of industry dined. Part 4 would ask that loudly and greenly. Beyond the bridge, rumor ran of a rival machine that sang, a contraption of pipes and creepers that harmonized into a dreadful, beautiful chord. Some engineers feared it. Song, they argued, could calm or could inflame. Others were mesmerized. A committee of children petitioned to hear it, claiming that harmonies might improve market mood. The committee won by promising cupcakes. At night, in the lamplit alleys, quiet revolutions stirred. A young inventor named Tessa walked with a spool of redstone and a dream. She believed the hush valve could be gentler, that regulators could learn to negotiate with hiss instead of punishing it. "We need more listening," she told a sympathetic street lamp. The lamp flickered in a way that suggested encouragement. The more the city experimented, the more peculiar the results. Some factories learned to sing and reduced accidents. Others accidentally taught creepers to whistle in dangerous intervals, producing a new form of music and a higher insurance premium. Suitors courted with calibrated hisses, and weddings featured synchronized detonations that cleaned the cake table in one polite puff. Meanwhile, philosophers argued about consent. Were creepers engines or partners? Did the comfort of civilization justify harnessing a living thing? The debate spilled into coffee houses, where people argued while their chairs occasionally vanished into polite craters. The moral of the story seemed stubbornly unresolved. Yet, in workshop corners and on rooftop terraces, inventors and children kept building. The hiss was louder than the foghorn, a bright, popping whisper that threaded through the cobbled streets and set every lampiston to tremble. The Industrial Revolution, here, inhaled creeper breaths and exhaled emerald steam. Imagine brick smokestacks with pixelated vine patterns, steam the color of lime jelly, and in every crankshaft a small green face thatches the rhythm of progress. The camera pans left and right as if it can't believe its own footage. A town powered by spontaneous green anxiety, where engines do not simply run. They tremble nervously and occasionally apologize with a polite puff of TNT-scented air engineer. Elsie stands at the heart of this absurdity, grease on blocky gloves, goggles fogged with green mist. She is equal parts inventor and therapist, hands on a wheezy boiler that hums like a caged creeper choir. Her notebook is full of sketches, mufflers shaped like parasols, valves that play lullabies, and one very ambitious diagram labeled Sootless Sigh. She listens more than she talks, because these engines have a habit of making conversational hisses that mean anything from "I am tired" to "now" would be a lovely moment to explode. A very blocky apprentice yawns beside her and whispers, "Not today," and a relieved puff makes the entire workshop smell faintly of gunpowder and basilay shift. The factory door bangs open, and the street becomes a parade of contraptions. Creeper boilers sit in carriage frames, their faces set to different moods: determined, sulky, theatrical. Wagons trundle by, belching chartreuse clouds that paint the sky in surreal stripes. Pistons stamp like impatient villagers, conveyor belts carry crates of fragile dreams. Redstone widgets, gears polished to a mirror sheen, crates marked fragile with crude creeper footprints. The scene is a silly ballet of industry, rhythmic and precarious. And every time a bell rings, the nearest creeper gives a tiny anxiety leap, and the whole town does a coordinated shuffle to avoid spontaneous demolition. There is a legal department to all this. A bureaucracy rose out of necessity. Hiss codes, explosion allowances, and a ministry of green steam that issues permits in triplicate, stamped with a little creeper embossed seal. Inspectors in top hats read hiss logs with solemnity, advocating for regulated panic and calibrated startle. The laugh is in how seriously everyone takes it. The town's anthem, when performed, includes a last-minute disclaimer. By inhaling, we consent to occasional structural adjustments. The absurdity becomes comforting. The citizens build contingency bunks and practice graceful flops. Children play a game called Flee the Face, which is equal parts dodgeball and emergency evacuation drill, but machinery evolves. Where first there were single creepers powering single boilers, now there are conglomerates. Creeper syndicates lease their temperament in bulk, and corporations sign contracts promising quotas of hissers per week. Railways creak across the plains, driven by locomotive hearts peppered with tiny green faces. Trains whistle a chorus of sibilant anxieties that make remote farms feel like part of the industrial organism. Freight yards convert creeper tension into rotational motion. Entire mills are choreographed spas for these explosive employees. It is industry and improvisational theater at once. Factory owners commission shows. The morning defenestration, where an engine flinches at precisely 903, and the orchestra plays an oboe solo, while a welded window element gracefully detaches. Nature itself adapts. Trees grow leaves tinted the same weird emerald, as the steam rivers shimmer with a translucent green surface film that smells faintly like a bonfire at a paper party. Farmers plant creeper nettles to coax steady puffs for irrigation pumps. Sheep are outfitted with small earbells that chime a calming rhythm, because panicked sheep means panicked engines, and panicked engines mean holes in fences. The town's market sells calm cakes infused with soothing lapis pollen. One bite and a boiler might sigh without exploding. Tourists come for the novelty and leave with ashes in their hair and tails of hissing engines that clap politely when tipped. But with innovation comes complication, mood-dependent efficiency. A storm of bad jokes in the pub 2 streets over can make the entire South Quarter underperform because laughter interferes with creeper patience. Productivity graphs look like waveforms of a nervous heart monitor. Technicians develop hissometers to quantify tremor levels, and when the gauge hits magenta, townsfolk enact protocol sigh, a collective inhalation, a ritualistic shush, a town crier reciting poetry meant to soothe. The ritual works about 73% of the time. Statistics, which are both comforting and terrifying. Elsie's big idea arrives on a rainy afternoon when a particularly melodramatic creeper named Mr. Popper refuses to cooperate. He sits, sulking, with steam curling like a green beard. Elsie fits on a contraption she calls the whisper hood, a woven helmet of glass and redstone that plays lullaby, loops directly into a creeper's auditory ports. Mr. Popper relaxes, his hiss becomes a purr. The whisper hood goes into production, and soon Elsie's invention is the talk of the district, carried in banners and used for everything from nursery care to diplomatic meetings with cross-biome delegations. It's a commercial hit and a moral compromise, calming gear for creatures that are happiest when tense. As the economy hums, a counterculture emerges, the boomers. They worship the rawness of spontaneous explosion, hosting underground pop nights where engines are encouraged to reach ecstatic detonations as art. Critics argue it's irresponsible. Romantic archaeologists call it authentic industrial theater. The boomers wear soot-scarred tunics and trade handmade fuses like protest badges. Their rallies are colorful chaos. Green confetti is actually a side effect of a misfired molder. but nobody can resist the pageantry. For every whisper hood sold, there are 2 secret holders of sticks with small, dangerous red tips. International interest escalates. Distant kingdoms send envoys in gilded armor to witness the green ingenuity. Some send offers to buy creeper patents, others offer coal in exchange for a month's worth of hisses. A delegation of endermen, tall and awkward, declare themselves curious and stoic observers, occasionally moving a stack of crates to the left for balance. Diplomacy is delicate. A disgruntled envoy attempting to sample an engine's hiss is escorted politely to the moat and offered tea instead. Cultural misunderstandings lead to comedy. Maps labeled gentle explosions confuse geographers for decades. Trouble brews not from industry, but from emotion. Creepers are sentient enough to prefer rhythm and respect, and when corporations push quotas, more hiss, faster cycles, Elsie finds herself caught between profit and mercy. There are reports of creepouts, mass shutdowns where every green engine refuses to function, expressing something like grief. Productivity falls. The town spends a week with mills silent, a hush so profound the only sound is the nervous tapping of a lone mechanic's wrench. It's human and blocky and utterly destabilizing. In those quiet days, children play tag in empty plazas, marveling at how loud the world had been. Resolution is messy and humane. Elsie organizes a summit on a rain-slicked platform, where machine and man are equal parties to negotiation. There are tears, literal and green, and compromise takes the form of mandatory rest blocks for creepers, a holiday called Reignite Day where engines are celebrated rather than pressed. Mutual consent becomes institutionalized. The Ministry of Green Steam rewrites the hiss codes with clauses about dignity, and the boomers grudgingly accept scheduled art nights. Industry learns to be slower and sweeter. The way a city learns to breathe. In the aftermath, the town blossoms into a strange kind of prosperity that smells like mint and gunpowder and resilience. Railways run on scheduled metaphors, factories hum like contented beasts, and Elsie retires her whisper hood to a museum, where schoolchildren stare at it with wide, reflective eyes. There is still risk. Every so often a miscalculation sends confetti of gravel into a square. But risk has become ritual, a reminder that life here is precarious and funny and full of inventive compromise. The final shot lingers on a skyline of chimneys, each topped with a tiny creeper face that watches the sunset like an audience. The green steam drifts upward, turning the evening sky into a stained-glass kaleidoscope. And for a moment, the town seems to exhale collectively. No explosion, just a communal sigh of a civilization that built its future on the edge of delightful chaos. As the scene softens, the narration leans in, quietly promising there are other frontiers. The deserts where sand creepers dream of windmills, the ocean where